home, you turn around, I feel the breeze over me. You watch your dreams unfold, let it come around and let it breathe over me. It's time to go away into the light. I feel the calming energy. I see the darkness coming, and I'm calling you to help me set me free. I'm calling for you. I'm calling for you. I'm calling for you. Lie all the fate of the world in your plans, guarding your faith with the palm of your hands. I know, yeah, I know, it's the unknown, the unknown. It's time to go away.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Today we're going to jump into a little bit different territory, if you want. So just a little recap of where we are. So I created a new branch advanced. So let me create a new class that I'm going to be calling advanced. And file extension, okay, and it extends controller. Okay. Yes, we want to add that to get, and of course we have a function construct in our case, and that has this view, and here we're going to use our template brace from file, and that is in views / let's call it advanced. Okay, and then here in our views, let's create a new HTML file that we call advanced, and I want to add that to get too. So this is our section, and here we're going to have h3 advanced, and here we're going to say ul, and here we're going to say li for topics as topic. Okay, so you remember that, of course. I assume that you guys have kind of watched the previous videos. If not, by the way, I highly recommend doing so. So that'll help out a lot in case you should wonder, what I'm doing here. So this is the structure that we previously created and that you can of course find on the GitHub. Now, what does this do? So here we have our topics, right? And basically this is topics. Okay, and so now let's see what that is doing if I'm basically visiting this and say okay. So what I should have, and I'm actually going to add this to my what do I call this, main, where I say, hey, wherever that happens, and I think that's simply on the index here are my routes. So here after logout, login, sign up, about, let's place that right here and say this is advanced, title advanced, show is always true. Okay, so here's my advanced now. Oh, so that is actually not good, because it's not what I expected to happen. And it's actually something interesting. But we're right on topic, right? So let's see what that is. That has a lot to do with the way that, so if I were to visit this, let's go back. If I were to visit this differently, right? So this is of course what it does is localhost PHP basic advanced. Okay. Permission denied. So PHP needs to know this. Yeah, PHP needs to know this. Okay, this is, I recently played around with my local Apache because I need a certificate. So this is probably a little bit off topic, but nonetheless, let's quickly check this out. Hold on, where was this again? Let's quickly do this here. Where are you bitching about varlib PHP? Okay, let's see why that's the case. Let's see why that's the case. And that belongs to www data, which sounds good to me. Actually sounds very good to me. Is this not what's happening? Probably not. So this probably should be Stefan. Why not? Who are you? Who are you? Okay, so this couldn't be more interesting. So we have a permission denied, right, for this. So what does this mean? It means that apparently we cannot write to this repository, even though, ironically, if you look at it, and now that we changed it, it's actually 777, right? So it's super open. So the question that we have is, okay, as which user is this PHP running on the Apache, right? And that's something that we of course can simply kind of like figure out. If so that depends on your system. But what I'm going to do is basically like, okay, let's do a little bit of group management here. So I assume that stuff like that potentially happens on your what's it called, on your server, right? Where I said like, okay, this could potentially happen when you're running something on wherever you deploy. So in my case, what I want to do is do group mod and kind of see what's going on here. So here's a list of my groups, and I assume, let me see whether or not I have that here. Yeah, no, there's no Apache, and this is actually www data, so that is oddly correct. That is oddly correct. So what I think is that I probably want to do something a little bit along the lines of group mod www data. Try again later. Okay. Sudo group mod www data. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Okay, so let's Google it then. Okay, which user is PHP running as? And that's probably something where you say, okay, this is not what we want. That's not really what we want. We want to do this, in that case, for Ubuntu. It's running in the current PHP script. It's simply who am I? Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Let's actually do that. And let's say, okay, var dump. And then, so be careful with exec, by the way. That's a very powerful and dangerous command. But nonetheless, in our case, this should be fine. Oops. Let's die. www data. Yeah, that looks about right. That looks about right. And the question now is, okay, so if I am www data and this session used to be, okay, I mean, now we renamed it, right? Yeah, now it belongs to Stefan. So let's change that again. www data, and group is www data. Sessions. And we can see now it belongs to www data. So the big question is, if that's the case, could have sworn that was the case initially, wasn't it? Okay, I'm a little confused, to be honest with you. Why that was even an issue in the first place. So okay, cool. So let's look at the debugging option. So what we see now here, right, is that I have this notice, which makes perfect sense to me, right, because we did not declare topics, right? So that's definitely something that's pretty interesting. So how do I even see those kind of warnings? Because whatever is a notice, there are three different stages, right? The first one would basically be a notice. That would be stuff like, hey, this will be deprecated in the future, or, you know, like basically everything that you can completely ignore to the in most cases, right? So this is kind of like, yes, this will functionally not influence anything, but probably you wanted to use topics, so that it's potentially an issue for you as a developer, not necessarily for the functionality. Then the warnings, which basically are functional problems, but execution can still go on. And then, of course, there are the death of a script, right? The fatal errors that basically make it impossible for the script to further execute. Now, the first thing that we want to know is, okay, how is that even a thing? Now, if you think back to our, and I think it was in the index PHP, yeah. So we made a couple of ini sets here. Now, the reason I wrote it like this is because this is something you can write either in your Apache or Nginx itself, Nginx, in a htaccess file, or of course at runtime you can set it on, like here within a PHP script. So if that were not the case, right, then something like a warning, a notice, is something that I would never even see. I would just notice that, hey, apparently this is not what I want, right? I would basically see that. So that's the first thing that we probably want to do, is to say, okay, so in the debugging, and let's actually call this advanced, let's not even do that. Let's say, okay, so the first thing we probably have to do is to declare topics. And topics should be an array, and set error warning. Okay, and as you can see, that problem actually did not resolve. That is interesting. Topics. Topics is topic. Okay, I'm actually kind of curious why that's the case now, but let's go to it a little bit later. So what we basically say is, okay, we do have some kind of error that we can basically set on this level. So one thing that you might be interested in is a startup error. And if you are dealing with something that is not connected directly, like MySQL and so on, there are also different forms of error reportings you might look into, because sometimes it's not a PHP error, it's a SQL error, and that would not really influence your script, and then you search for things forever. So again, as long as we're in development mode, we basically want to see all of this. And then the next thing that we can look into is basically, okay, how do we, and we've done this throughout this project, right? It's kind of like, okay, how do you get into the specific problem that you're dealing with? So for example, right now, I have this issue that I see, okay, there doesn't seem to be a topic displayed, even though in my controller, I thought I gave it topics and topic, right? So let's maybe do it like this and say, okay, let's look at this, right? How can I possibly figure out what the issue is? So the first thing that I want to do is to say, okay, so is topics maybe not defined, right? Well, in order to do that, so before I call this, or actually after I call this, let's use the function vardump to say, okay, topics, right? And let's run it again, and I can see, so this seems to be set, right? This seems to be set, and it doesn't seem to be an issue here. So the next thing that I'm going to investigate is, okay, is it maybe a problem with the markup, right? I mean, here, of course, if you've watched the other videos, you already see it. Like, okay, there's no such thing as for, right? There's only an n for, and that would potentially solve our problem here. And then, as you can see, yep, that is the reason. And then this kind of stuff works. But setting your var dumps and so on is potentially a difficult endeavor. So the thing that we basically want to look into is to say, like, okay, aren't there any kind of helper tools that could basically do this for us, right? And the answer is yes, there is. And there's a send debugger and X Debug, and I recommend X Debug, which will really, 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 really help you. I will show you in which way. So if I set so-called breakpoints, right? So let's just say, okay, I want to see what happens when this is done. And then I kick in my listener, right? And then basically reload. You can see this is still waiting. This is still not executing because we're breaking here. The script is not executing further. This is where I set my breakpoint. And as you can see down here, let's have a closer look at that maybe. I can basically now see all kinds of, and let me close that one so we have a nicer view. I can see all kinds of things. So this is the kind of output that you get in kind of any IDE. I kind of like it that mine shows, what's going on here directly. So do you see how all of a sudden I can see, hey, this is what topics is currently, right? This is what the view is currently. Do you see that? This is my view. Here again, my topics. Okay, this is how I translate it. Now see, it looks like this. And that's pretty cool. Additionally, I can basically see down here every variable that the script currently has access to. So again, I can see my topics, can see what kind of values they have. I can basically see this is this is the context, right? What kind of cookies are currently there, right? This is, in our case, not so interesting. The environment variables, right? Where we can basically see, yeah, this is the stuff that we have access to from that perspective. The get variables, which of course are just our advanced in that case, and the requests are, that's exactly the same. All of our server stuff, right? So okay, what is this? How are different server variables resolved? All of those things that we could potentially want to inspect, or see even the globals, right? And even our constants, right? With our path in that case. So all of that stuff I can basically say, and then I can simply say, okay, let's jump to the next one, which there is none. So then it's actually done and it's going to execute. And at which point we will basically have run through this. Okay. So if you imagine more complex code, then that kind of approach, right, by breakpoints is such an enormous help to basically quickly find out what the issue is. And you can basically jump through different levels of your code and see where you get unexpected results from particular variables and so on. Now, how does this work, right? So that's a little bit the question here. Of course, normally PHP executes on whatever local machine you're using, right? So I just assume in Apache now in most cases. So what you can do is to say, well, okay, but can't I listen to what my server is doing, for example, in my IDE? And yes, you can. There are two things that you need to do, actually three things that you need to do. So the first one is to install X Debug. Oops. Right. This is the official documentation. So in most cases, you will simply do an well, but now you either use PECL and so on. You can also simply download a DLL. Here, this is the Windows version, right? That's installing a DLL that you then have to place into, well, whatever your SAMP maybe. That depends. You can compile it yourself if you want to, and so on. So the reason why you want to do this is so your server can basically understand that a particular module is used that is going to communicate with an outside source. So whether or not you need this, by the way, is something that is questionable. That depends on your system. So again, this is here for Linux and Macs and so on. So look into that, and also look into any kind of guidelines that your IDE would provide. Again, I'm using PHP Storm, and as you can see, the way it works over here is I just go to debug, and so here's the installation guide. I can validate whether or not that's happening, what is the port I'm using, and so on. This is stuff that more or less is done automatically. This, by the way, 9000 is the standard port of X Debug, but you can set that differently. And what you need for what here is called zero configuration debugging is to set, and I don't know if you find that here. No, the remote, enable remote to true. This is actually, let me quickly validate this, then you see it. Okay. Why doesn't this open? It does. Whoa. don't double click, I guess. That's not the remote. Here, remote mode required. So I'll try to connect the debug client as soon as the script starts. Yes, okay, that's actually not really what I meant. I want to have remote enable. There. Okay, so this is the stuff that you would set in your ini file, so in your php-ini file, and also be careful which ini file, because depending on what IDE you use, there might be a difference between what the CGI, the CLI, and then the actual server uses. So you know, dig into that a little bit if you need to. If that works, you can basically look at that in your Apache setup. So the way that should look like is, I actually hope I have an info here. I do not. Let's actually see if the Apache itself does that. I don't have that. Okay, let's quickly create one within our project. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just simply quickly create a new file here, new PHP file that I'm going to be calling info. And in that case, I don't want to add this to Git. And what I'm going to do is that not called phpinfo? phpinfo, that's what it is. Okay. Right, so let's go back to my project, PHP basics, and then I say info.php. And if I do that, so this is the only line I need, as you can see. I can basically see how certain things work, right? So if you give this a little bit of a bigger look here. Oh, not what I meant. This is what I meant to do. You will basically notice that everything that's installed, and depending on the environment, again, that might be a couple of things, but for our perspective, what is interesting, right, is, well, what about X Debug? Right, so this is how you basically verify. Where is it? Here. No, not even that. Where's the interesting stuff? Where's the interesting stuff? Here. This is what you want to see, right? So if you don't see that, then it's not installed properly. And as you can see here, all the different variables and how they're set, right? So this is what you want to play around with in your ini file if you need to overwrite any kind of default here, right? So that's how you make sure that it's running. Now that's basically step one. What do you do if that is ensured? Well, the next step is, let's go back to, what the hell did I click here? Let's go back to our advanced and notice what we also have here. So I have up here a debugging is enabled, right? So this is an extension that basically listens to X Debug. So for Chrome, that is actually really, I think, just called debugger. Chrome extension X Debug helper. Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. Yeah, right. So that would be that, and that's how you basically get to the to this extension. And again, you can create settings here, but that's not really what you even want. Now, this extension is important because basically it can listen to the requests, right? So that basically connects, you know, all of the output and so on that we require. And if we have all of that set up, then, and the third step, what we're going to do is, and we already looked at that, is to basically create an integration for our IDE, right? So in here in PHP Storm, it comes out of the box, and in your environment variable, what actually ultimately works here is, I don't even know where it does that. Is it not an include path? It's probably somewhere here. No. I don't even know how it reads that in, to be honest with you. Is that in core? No, I don't know. But again, in my IDE, that's all done automatically, and I assume whatever IDE you're using, you will find the use cases for it. And then you can basically listen to it and set breakpoints. So again, for me, that's just this little start listening for debug connections, and then I can basically execute it accordingly. And that is very, very useful. And we definitely want to do that in order to, look under the hood. And I know that setup is something that is a little bit strenuous at the beginning. But don't forget, you only need that on your local machine. And once that is set up, you will have such hours and hours and hours of time savings when you are actually debugging something. I was just helping somebody today with an issue that could have been resolved in 30 seconds if X Debug was present on that machine. Now, that said, there's another topic that we probably want to look a little bit into, and that is testing. Right? So how does testing work? So you probably know that when you come from JavaScript or whatever you've done before, that a lot of people talk about stuff like test-driven development and continuous integrations and all those buzzwords that are really hip in the industry. And needless to say, most people don't really do that, right? Because they think it's easier to kind of work from the basis of just building something and then kind of debugging it on the fly. But the more complex your projects become, the more side effects they have, right? I make changes to one thing and it influences the other and so on. So in our structure, that's not really the danger because everything is pretty clean and simple. But you'll soon find yourself in a project that has a high complexity and that basically would allow you to make mistakes that potentially break something that already worked. So how do you prevent that? Well, with what they refer to as unit testing, right? So how does a unit test work? Well, that's a very good question. And we're going to start a new directory now that we call tests. Okay. So as you can see, my IDE already suspects what I want to do with this. It has this kind of a green mark here. And if I create a new PHP test and I say a unit test, right, then, okay, so class to test, so let's just say I want to test advanced, right, and yep, that's the file path that I want to test, and this is in advanced test, okay, and I don't need a namespace for my tests in that case, so that's fine, and I can basically do that. In that case, yes, I want to add the file to test. So this uses PHP Unit framework, right? So that is something that we have not really installed yet, as you can see, right? Do you see that? There's just nothing that would actually test it. So let's see what happens if we actually run this, right? So here it basically says PHP Unit is not configured, right? Okay, that's absolutely true. So why is it not configured and it cannot be found in the Composer autoloader? Well, that's correct because we have not installed it. So what we want to do is here in our require, we basically want to have a require def as well, where we say PHP Unit slash PHP Unit, and that's already there. And in they've got version 9.14. Cool. Haven't done that, I guess. And then I run the update command with the Composer executable. In that case, yeah, that's fine. So what that does is basically now it blocks my RAMs, but as soon as that's done, if it's ever done, Come on. So this is still running, right? In case you don't see that down here, it's busy. It's a bigger package because it has a lot of kind of dev tools under the board. I actually love the new PHP Storm. Do you see how it now tells you, hey, this can be updated, this can be updated? It's pretty cool, huh? Okay. Okay. So as you can see, this is still busy. It's indexing at the moment, but I'm pretty sure I already see it in my PHP unit. Do you see it? I can already basically see what's going on here. Okay. Now, let's go back to advanced test and see what happens if I run it. So it still doesn't do anything at the moment, but what you can see is that, okay, so well, this is actually wrong, but it basically says like, okay, those tests failed, right? There was one test, which there wasn't any kind of test. So we probably need to create a function, and then we look at our advanced and say, we want to test a construct, right? Where we say, okay, construct test. Okay, and then we say, okay, this assert same a. I'll explain that in a second. Now, if I run this test, oh, then it failed. No tests found in advanced test. Extends test case. That's actually weird. That is actually a little bit weird. Why is that the case? Do we need to do it like this? I hope not. Let's try it again. Okay. No test found in advanced test. Let me actually look at something quickly. What could we do here as a comparison? Where do we have a PHP test that is nice? Let me see. Don't we have? Let me see. Where's my? I really have nothing on this machine that is suitable for this process. Apparently not, huh? Apparently not, which is kind of strange. Okay, no problem. Let me see. I'm gonna go to GitHub quickly and go through my private repositories. That's why you don't see anything. And make sure that I kind of see what's going on here. This all looks good. I formulated it wrong. It must start with test. Okay. It must start with tests. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is the kind of stuff that, by the way, has a lot to do with out-of-the-box behavior. So what you can do, and this actually makes sense, is that you have a PHP Unit XML, right, that you can create here. Let's actually do that because that's good practice here, right? So we don't have that kind of problem. So I'm going to create a PHP Unit XML. And yes, we want to. And what this does is basically say, okay, that's a regular XML, right? We say, okay, yeah, XML version 1, encoding is UTF-8, and that'll do. And then we have a PHP unit. And actually, I'm going to kind of take a boilerplate here. Hold on. Because you can normally auto-generate that, and that makes life easier. And I'm going to do the same here. Okay, let's walk through that quickly. So vendor autoload, you can see that basically takes care of our autoloading, and that's basically exactly what we want to do. Convert errors to exceptions. That's also true. We need that kind of behavior. And then so the directory suffix is test PHP. Let's see if that's correct. Yes. So we have to call it test PHP. See that? And it in the folder tests. That is correct. Right. So that is also what we have. And then we take process uncovered files from whitelist. Okay, this has a lot to do with test playground. This is what we don't need. So this is for test coverage, right? So I do a coverage clover type, and the reason why you will actually see that in a second what that means. So of course I don't want that for test coverage that tests or vendor is something that is actually considered. So of course I'm not going to test my tests, in other words, right? That should be obvious. And why should that be obvious? Well, because I will the vendor folder, for example, that's going to contain all of my my packages, and those packages have to be tested anyway. Otherwise, I will not install them. Or if those are my packages, I have repos where I actually test them, if I need to, right? So in our setup, so again, in my case, that would be something I need to kind of specify here. So path to script is something that, okay, got it, and then configuration file. That is basically something that I want to kind of explore here a little bit. Memes, okay, whatever. And my configuration file, in that case, I don't even know if that's use composer autoloader. I don't even know if that's what I want to do, but I guess I will. So here I go into my PHP basics, if I can ever find it, PHP basics, and then say my PHP Unit XML, please. Okay. Here, test routes, directory test, and then that basically seems to be fine. So when I execute this now, there are two things that you will notice, right? So first of all, let's see if it works at all. When header's already sent. Okay, this is interesting. This is actually very interesting. So the tests passed, but we get this warning, right? So this is what happens now, right? That basically I got stricter with a couple of things, and now I notice stuff that I didn't notice before. So here I get basically this warning. That is because we're converting that, right? Here, convert notices to exceptions. So we're going to say nope, not even a notice is something that we will tolerate. Now, can it start session when head is already sent? That is something that we should look into, because this should probably not happen. this would probably not happen, and we have to see why that's even the case, and where we even set that. Where's our session start? Where does that even happen? Because I don't think that it actually happens in advanced, does it? And I don't think it happens in controller either. I think it happens, is it in startup? Yeah, it happens in startup. So at the point where this gets executed, we basically say, okay, apparently there's already output before that happens. Right, so that's interesting to know. Let's think about what that could potentially mean. In our advanced test, if we create this to a public function, and we were to say we're only executing this one, let's see if we get the same error. Yes, we do. So that's a warning. That's a problem that we basically get, and it has a lot to do with the session that is trying to be assigned to our test runner itself. So the weird thing about how tests work is like all of those functions basically work in a way where you would kind of reinitiate, right? So that we'll see that when we do setups, that basically after one test ran, the whole thing will basically be reinitiated, and we get a new instance of it. Now, for the question of why this code is executed, you might kind of wonder, why is that the case, right? So why would it possibly make sense for this to be executed that it actually takes in startup, right? So this is the only way, if we look around, where session start happens, then you will see this is the only place where it actually happens. So if in our advanced controller, in our advanced test, if we don't even, the only thing that we do here is to use, right? How come this startup is even executed? Well, let's have a look at our PHP unit again. So we're using the PHP autoload, right? The vendor autoload, which of course, uses what we need to load from our composer. And the only thing that we are kind of wondered about is like, okay, but if we don't want to test on that level, right? If we don't want it to basically load this, what are we going to do about it? And does it work if we say, well, exclude, and then, oops, file, what's it called? Startup. Will that create an issue? Now, the first thing that I have to quickly check is, because this is not, that's not how it's called. It's not called file, right? It's not called filed. Hold on. It's just exclude. Okay. That's really all it is. Okay. Directory, everything, exclude, directory. Does it have a new system? I don't think so. Actually, let's not do that. Let's not do that on this level. Let's ignore this whole thing for now. Because I want to run into it naturally. So we'll see what that means, by the way. Why it's interesting to know stuff like that. Right? Oh. Hold on. Is this not a notice? Is that a warning? Check this out. Okay. So as you can see now, I did not convert it, right? So I ran into it in a different mode where I basically did not take care of it. So now what happens? Now we can basically backtrace where it happened. So let's maybe start with the code coverage. So see it as a warning. The code coverage is something that we now have in our XML. Do you see that here? So now we can basically see, okay, what of our code is tested. That's going to be interesting for later. Let's see if we have an output of that. No, we have a more complex issue here first. Okay, here. Here at the end basically is our output. And since we have, this huge problem that we need to solve for first, we don't really have enough information here of what's happening here. So, but now we have, something very interesting, and we have the stack trace, right? So that's the debug, and we can basically see what happened here, right? So this is the here where it happens. We knew that's the problem, and then we have to see, okay, why is that the case, right? Why does session start even is that even being executed? And by the way, if you remember, why was it not executed when we did not use this XML, right? That's maybe something that you want to remember. So before we used this, it wasn't an issue, right? Let's test it again. If I change the output here and say, no, don't use that, and say apply, and go to my advanced test and execute it, I do not have that issue. Do you see that? It's not an issue. But the problem with that is, okay, why is it not an issue? Well, it's not an issue because my my controllers are now basically tested from the other way around, right? Where I say like, okay, so this auto loads the stuff that I have. So far, so good. But if I ever need, for example, something that is required in our session, in our setup, right? What if I ever want to test an end file? What if I ever want to test, whether or not I can connect to DB? Then I somehow need this startup, right? So that's definitely something we have to consider. So if we changed it again, oops. Let me see. Okay. You have to excuse me for a second. I'll be right back.
You make me feel like home. You turn around, I feel the breeze over me. You watch your dreams unfold. Let it come around and let it breathe over me. It's time to go away into the light. I feel the calming
Okay, sorry about that. Let's see what's going on here. How long should we wait for you to start? I don't know when you... Wait, don't you see? Hold on, I have to see what's going up here. In my chat, I kind of missed that. When was that? Oh, the sound is off. Can you hear me? Hello, hello, hello? Let me see. So, according to my microphone setting and audio output, okay, so YouTube works, but what? But Twitch doesn't? Is that correct? Can you check that again? That would be cool. Because I'm confused. Oh, okay. So it's on your end. Okay. So anyway, welcome back to the topic. So again, what we have, what we basically have discussed, sorry, I just came back, was that the session start is something that, of course, will always be an issue because we don't really have headers in our test environment. We, of course, are writing to the std out directly from the start. As you can see, we're already writing stuff, right? So what do? Well, so we want our unit tests to basically work on that level, right? So we want to say, like, yes, every notice, every warning, like we want to be super strict about things. But there will, of course, be the issue that that we have a couple of things that will basically behave differently when we run in a test or when we have a real-life scenario, right? So we will later see that we will need to account for that when we work with sessions. But what we are going to do for now is to simply say, okay, let's write a setup, right? So setup. So what this does, this is basically something that gets executed prior to any of our tests being executed, right? So in our case, what we could basically say is like, okay, so if we want that happens prior to anything else running, can't we just, start the session ourselves and then suppress error warnings accordingly? Well, let's try it out, right? So let's do our session start here. And actually, I mean, we're using PHP 7.4, so I'm not sure if that's itself isn't a deprecation issue, but let's try it with suppressing any kind of errors in itself and see what it does then. Okay, and apparently it still is an issue. That is, of course, disappointing. I actually thought I could kind of fix that, but apparently that is not high enough in the order. Okay, let's dabble into that maybe on a... let's try one more thing, and if not, we're going to simply use the composer. And so, what is that called again? Is that the class setup? Setup before class, that's it. Right, let's see if that works. And so this didn't work. But for an explanation here, so you can basically say, okay, before any of this runs, you can define basically a function that would be executed prior to the instances that execute the actual tests, right? But we're getting kind of in a rabbit hole here, and I want to be conscious of your time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the default composer setup for PHP Unit, and that should basically get rid of our problem for now. And that's not perfectly ideal, but you can see at the moment we can basically work with it and go to what we're actually ought to do here. So you probably wonder, so I wrote this assert same here, that basically is one of the functions of PHP Unit, or there's a similar case for most other languages that would basically have the same kind of logic to say, like, okay, let's assert something to be true or not true or whatever. And what we're testing for in this case is as stupid as, well, we're going to test if A is string A, which of course will always be true, and therefore makes really no sense. But the reason why we wanted to do that, so if I'm going to the test runner, the reason why we basically want to explore that is to basically see how this in general works. So as you can see, this has test results now as a complete class, and there's one test with one assertion, and I can basically already see what my output is here, right? So okay, this worked fine. And what I want to test in reality is, of course, okay, so what could possibly be something that I could test in here, right? So let's just assume that we say, like, okay, we want to know, if you remember the error that we had, that we couldn't read topics. We want to know what topics are, right? So instead of having topics here, we assume that in the future this might come from, I don't know, maybe the database. Okay, so I'm going to write a function here for the future that I'm going to call getTopics, and there are no conditions here, and for now we are as primitive and saying, like, okay, this is what's happening. Okay, this is what's happening. This is just going to get those this array back, and my topics here would be, okay, this getTopics. Okay, so from a functional standpoint, let's quickly go back to our thing here. Of course, nothing would actually change, right? This is like, okay, so now topics come from a different function. So far, so good. It's a little bit cleaner for sure, but other than that, we don't really see why this is any kind of a change. Of course, we could look at this and say, don't I want to do this exactly here? Can I not move this right here? And yes, of course you can. So those are the kind of things you can think about. But more importantly, now we have a distinct function that has one single responsibility, right? So one of the important things of writing clean code is looking into the principles that are defined. And one of the, so we talked about don't repeat yourself. That's I think one of the most important principles to adhere to, because it makes you ultimately a better coder per definition, because you start thinking about, you basically automatically abstract things. And on another level, it makes your code more maintainable. But one of the other principles, again, is single responsibility, which now means, okay, so we have a function that does one thing. This gets topics. That's all it's doing, right? It's literally all it's doing. And what I can do is to say, okay, let's test this function, right? So let's create a public function, and now we're going to say we're going to test get topics. Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're going to, so see, we have our advanced, right? So we can do a couple of things here. The most primitive one is to simply directly create an instance, right? So let's see what would happen if we were to do that. So if we create an instance, we basically should get the construct automatically, right? Which is a little bit something that we want to avoid. but nonetheless, let's try it, right? So we're going to say, okay, instance is, and then I start to say new advanced, right? There we go. Now I have my new instance, and I'm going to say, okay, so my topics should be instance get topics, right? So, and now I know, what do I know? So let's just say that in the future I plan to retrieve whatever kind of information, but what we do know is a couple of things that we need to basically plan for. So the way we're using it now is what? So we're asserting two things here, right? So the first thing that we assert that it is an array. Right? That's we absolutely need to understand that that is an array. That if that's fulfilled, then we're happy, then we know, okay, so we got the right kind of answer. But what else do we want to potentially do? Well, it's a particular kind of array as well, right? So if this were to return something like Sam, whatever, then we would have a problem here, right, in how we're rendering this. So from our perspective right now, it cannot be an associative array, right? So how do we test this? And the question is, of course, well, what do we know about a particular type of array, right? We could of course say, well, there must be a particular key, and that key must be numeric, and we're going to say that key is 0, right? And what we also want to do is to basically say, okay, and that is topics, right? So the thing is always the same, the markup is always the same in those kind of things, is basically this is what we kind of expect, and this is the actual, right? That's, you can actually, in reality, you can, in most cases, just turn it around without a bigger effect, so you know that the test fails either way, of course. But if you get the error output and says like, okay, this is what we expect, this is the actual, it makes sense to put that in the right kind of order. Now, can you think of anything else that we could not possibly, that could possibly happen here? And the answer is, of course, yes. So is it okay for the array to be empty? Is it okay to not have topics, right? Because if that were okay, then we have a problem with our tests, because then our test would basically fail here, right? Because, well, if it's empty, then it has no key 0 either, so the test would fail. But for our purposes now, I say like, no, that should not be the case, right? I demand that this is not empty, right? So let's run it and see what happens. And sure, I forgot actually to mention what the problem with the instance is. So if we create an instance like that, then okay, what we're missing now here, if you remember how we set up, so now we avoided using our setup PHP, right? Our startup PHP. We avoided that, which means that stuff like path, reading the environment variables, getting the database set up, and all of that will not work. So this doesn't work because path isn't set, right? Because this path isn't set. And that's where we basically start, going into our bottlenecks here and say, okay, so we have two possibilities for those kind of things. So either we're going to question, wait. So isn't there a way, right, to say, well, maybe we don't want to construct this, right? Maybe we want to, oh, sorry, do I get this again? Yes, okay. Hold on a second, please. Yeah, I don't actually have time. So I have to make a small break here. But then maybe let's get to just so we can keep on trucking the next time. So there are two different issues basically that we want to think of. So one is like, okay, do we want to avoid it and say like, well, can't we use a reflector class and basically fake the instance with what PHP Unit has on board? And the simple answer is yes. But the more important answer is, but do we want to do that, right? Because then, sure, we could abstract that and say like, okay, that's always the case. But what we've built here basically will heavily rely on things that we have, that we want in our MVC system to work. So the question is, well, wouldn't it be a better solution to fight the session problem? And so those are the two things that we unfortunately have to go into the next time. But that's basically something that we will dabble deeper into. Now, I know the testing, we're going to have a couple of sessions on that. So that's something that is very confusing at the beginning. So I hope, like you're not kind of shocked on what you're seeing here. But let's basically walk through kind of the things that you can definitely start with immediately. So the error warning in your INI or in your Apache or your Nginx and so on, that's something we talked about. Then how to set up X Debug and how breakpoints can help you to basically find out where things go wrong in your code. That's something you want to work with. And I know that, depending on what you're running, that might take you some time to get that basically set up as well. And with testing, we have to go on the next time, and I will not make a push right now. So on the GitHub repo, you will not find any kind of updates. So bear with me. We're going to basically have our next session as soon as possible. Thanks again for watching as usual, and I see you guys soon.
You make me feel like home.